Chapter 1 Platform 13. The rain began just before midnight. Not the gentle kind that whispered against windows. This rain crashed onto the city like thousands of tiny nails, turning streets into rivers of black reflections. Neon signs shimmered in puddles, their colors bleeding together beneath the relentless downpour. The city never truly slept. It simply became quieter, more dangerous. Far above the empty streets, the clock tower struck 12. 1, 2, 3. Each echo rolled through the night like a warning. Dr. Ethan Cross stepped out of St. Gabriel Psychiatric Institute, pulling his coat tighter against the cold wind. 36 years old. Criminal psychologist. A man whose profession was understanding broken minds. Ironically, he no longer understood his own. Dark circles framed his tired eyes. His wedding ring was gone, but a pale mark remained on his finger, a ghost of a life he had once lived. Tonight had been exhausting. A patient had insisted that someone was stealing his memories. Another refused to sleep because he believed a train arrived every midnight carrying the dead. Ethan had dismissed it as another trauma-induced delusion. Now, walking alone beneath the storm, those words echoed strangely in his mind. Don't board the last train. He shook his head. Years of treating disturbed patients had taught him one lesson. Fear was contagious. The subway station was almost deserted. A flickering sign buzzed overhead. Only 3 people waited on the platform. An elderly woman clutching a faded suitcase. A businessman staring blankly at his phone. A teenage boy wearing headphones, tapping his foot to music only he could hear. No one spoke. The silence felt unnaturally heavy. Ethan checked the digital display. 11:58 p.m. His train would arrive in 2 minutes. Perfect. He wanted nothing more than to return to his empty apartment. Then, the station lights went out. Complete darkness swallowed the platform. A collective gasp echoed through the tunnel. 3 seconds later, the emergency lights flickered on. Everything looked different. The advertisements on the walls had vanished. The security cameras were gone. Even the station map had disappeared, as though someone had quietly erased pieces of reality. What the? The businessman looked around in confusion. Was that a power outage? Nobody answered. From somewhere deep inside the tunnel came a sound, a distant whistle, long, low, haunting. It wasn't the modern electric subway. It sounded old, ancient, like a steam locomotive from another century. The elderly woman suddenly stood, her face drained of color. "No," she whispered. "It found me again." A freezing wind rushed through the tunnel. The air smelled of wet metal and burnt coal. Then, headlights emerged from the darkness. Not bright white LEDs. Warm yellow lanterns. An old black train slowly rolled into the station. Its paint was chipped. Its windows were clouded. Its wheels screeched against the tracks with a sound that made Ethan's skin crawl. There was no route number, no destination, no driver visible through the front window. Only one word was engraved above the first carriage. Midnight. The train stopped without a sound. Its doors slid open. Inside, every seat was empty. The station speakers crackled. Static filled the air. Then a distorted voice whispered, "Platform 13. Ethan frowned. Platform 13? This station only had 12 platforms. He turned toward the map. It still showed 12. When he looked back, the sign above him now read, Platform 13. His heartbeat quickened. This has to be some kind of prank. The businessman laughed nervously. Very funny. Nobody else laughed. The teenage boy had removed his headphones. His eyes were fixed on the train. I've dreamed about this, he murmured. The elderly woman slowly stepped toward the open doors. Tears streamed down her wrinkled face. I've been running for 20 years. She smiled sadly. I suppose it's finally my turn. Without another word, she boarded. The doors remained open, waiting for everyone else. Ethan reached into his pocket for his phone. No signal. Battery 100%. A second later, the screen turned completely black. Not dead, just blank. Around him, every passenger experienced the same thing. No phones worked. No watches ticked. Time itself seemed to pause. Then, from inside the train, a man appeared. He wore a perfectly pressed dark conductor's uniform. His cap hid his eyes. His face was expressionless. He held an old brass ticket punch in one hand. Without saying a word, he extended a stack of faded paper tickets. Each ticket already had a passenger's name printed on it. Not seat numbers. Not destinations. Just names. When Ethan looked closely, his own name was waiting at the top of the stack. Ethan Cross. His blood ran cold. He had never seen this man before. So how did he know his name? The conductor finally spoke. His voice was calm, almost gentle. The train is leaving. A pause. You've all been expected. The businessman backed away. This is insane. He turned toward the station exit. But instead of stairs, he found only a solid concrete wall. The exit had disappeared. Panic spread instantly. People searched for another way out. Every corridor led back to platform 13. Every staircase returned to the same place. There was no escape. The only open path was through the doors of the waiting train. The conductor checked an old silver pocket watch. Without looking up, he said, "You have 1 minute." Outside, thunder shook the city. Inside the station, the lights flickered one last time. Ethan stared at the ticket in his trembling hand. Something deep inside him screamed not to board. Yet another voice, quieter, older, whispered the opposite. Asterisk, you've already been here before. Asterisk. The train gave a long, mournful whistle. The doors remained open, waiting, as if they knew. Every one of them would step inside. Chapter 2. The whistle echoed through the station. Long, cold, unnatural. One by one, the passengers stepped onto the train. The elderly woman entered first, clutching her worn suitcase as though it contained the last piece of her life. The teenage boy followed without hesitation, his eyes distant, almost hypnotized. The businessman cursed under his breath, but climbed aboard anyway. Ethan remained on the platform. Every instinct told him to run. But there was nowhere to run. The station had become a prison. The exits had vanished. The tunnel behind him stretched into endless darkness. With a deep breath, Ethan stepped inside. The moment both of his feet crossed the doorway, bang! The doors slammed shut. The sound echoed through every carriage. The train lurched forward. For several moments, no one spoke. The only sounds were the rhythmic clatter of wheels against old tracks and the faint hum of ancient machinery. Click, clack, click, clack. It was strangely calming, too calming. Ethan looked around the carriage. The interior belonged to another era. Dark polished wood covered the walls. Brass lamps cast a warm amber glow instead of harsh electric light. Deep red velvet seats lined both sides of the carriage. Everything looked perfectly preserved, except for one thing. Every window reflected the passengers clearly, but beyond the glass, there was only darkness. No tunnel, no lights, nothing. It was as if the train was traveling through an endless void. The conductor walked slowly down the aisle. He carried an old leather ticket pouch. Stopping beside each passenger, he quietly punched their ticket. Click. The sound echoed unnaturally. When he reached Ethan, he handed him the faded ticket. Across the top, in elegant black ink, were only 3 words. Passenger number 7. No destination. No departure time. No arrival. Just a number. Ethan looked up. What does this mean? The conductor didn't answer. Instead, he moved to the next passenger as though Ethan had never spoken. Several minutes passed. The businessman finally stood. Enough. He marched toward the next carriage. I'm finding the emergency brake. The others watched silently. He disappeared through the connecting door. 10 seconds later, the door opened again. The businessman stepped back inside the very same carriage. He froze. What? He looked behind him. The connecting door had vanished. Only a wooden wall remained. No! He spun around. This isn't possible. He rushed to the opposite end, opened another door, walked through. 5 seconds later, he entered the carriage again from the first door. His breathing became rapid. We're going in circles. Nobody laughed, because everyone knew he wasn't lying. The teenage boy suddenly spoke. My name is Noah. His voice barely rose above a whisper. I've seen this train before. Every head turned toward him. I dreamed about it when I was little. His hands trembled. In every dream, someone disappears. Disappears where? Ethan asked. Noah looked toward the last carriage. I never stayed long enough to find out. The elderly woman quietly opened her suitcase. Inside were dozens of old photographs. Each picture showed the same smiling family. A husband, 2 daughters, a little dog. She gently touched one photograph. I can't remember their names. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I know they're my family. She frowned. But I can't remember their faces. Ethan slowly leaned closer. The photographs were changing. Before his eyes, the faces became blurred, then completely blank. Only empty white shapes remained where smiling faces had once been. The old woman gasped. No! She desperately flipped through the remaining pictures. Every face vanished. Every memory erased. She began sobbing. Please, don't take them away. A sudden voice filled the carriage. Not from a speaker. Not from the conductor. It seemed to come from everywhere. Memory loss has begun. Silence followed. Then, the lights flickered once, twice, 3 times. When they steadied again, One seat was empty. Everyone looked around. Someone was missing. The passengers counted each other. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Only 6 remained. The businessman. Ethan stood immediately. He was sitting right there. His briefcase still rested beside the seat. His jacket lay folded neatly across the armrest. But the man himself was gone. No screams, no footsteps, no open doors. Simply gone. The train continued moving as if nothing had happened. Click, clack, click, clack. Ethan searched every carriage. The businessman had vanished without a trace. Then he found something. Near the end of the train, a newspaper lay on the floor. It looked decades old. Across the front page was a headline: "Local businessman disappears without a trace." Below the headline was the same man who had vanished moments earlier. The newspaper's date made Ethan's blood run cold. October 17th, 1996. 30 years ago. Ethan stared at the photograph. It was impossible. The businessman on the train hadn't looked a day over 40. He couldn't have disappeared 30 years ago. Unless he never escaped this train. As Ethan slowly folded the newspaper, he noticed writing on the back. It wasn't printed. It had been written by hand, in dark black ink. 3 chilling words. "You're next." At that exact moment, the train whistle screamed through the darkness. Louder than before, longer than before, and somewhere, far beyond the black windows, someone knocked. 3 slow knocks. Knock, 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 from the outside, on a train that was racing through complete darkness. End of chapter 2.
Hashtag the midnight train. Hashtag final chapter, the last stop. The train had finally stopped. For the first time since Ethan stepped aboard, there was no rumble beneath his feet. No clatter of wheels. No mournful whistle. Only silence. The kind of silence that seemed to swallow every heartbeat. Outside the window, the darkness was gone. Instead, warm morning sunlight bathed an empty railway platform. A weathered sign stood beneath the golden light. It read, "Last stop." One by one, the remaining passengers rose from their seats. No one spoke. No one looked afraid anymore. The elderly woman smiled peacefully. "I remember them now," she whispered. "My husband, Sarah, Emily. They were waiting for me all along." As she stepped onto the platform, her body dissolved into thousands of tiny particles of light. Then she was gone. Noah, the teenage boy, looked at Ethan with a faint smile. "I wasn't here to survive," he said. "I was here so you could." He, too, disappeared into the morning light. Soon Ethan was alone. Only one person remained: the conductor. He stood beside the open door, his cap still shadowing his face. For the first time, he looked directly at Ethan. "Do you know where you are now?" he asked. Ethan shook his head. The conductor slowly removed his cap. Ethan froze. The face staring back at him was his own. Older, more tired, eyes filled with grief. "You," Ethan whispered. The older man nodded. "I am the part of you that never stopped remembering." Memories exploded through Ethan's mind. Not fragments, not dreams. The truth. 8 years earlier, it had been raining, just like tonight. Ethan had finished another exhausting shift at the psychiatric hospital. He was exhausted, emotionally numb, and determined to get home. His wife, Claire, had insisted on picking him up. "You look like you haven't slept in days," she had laughed. "I'll drive." But Ethan refused. "I'm fine." He wasn't. While driving across the old railway crossing, Ethan glanced at his phone for only a second. A message from a patient flashed across the screen. When he looked up, The warning lights were flashing. A freight train was already approaching. He slammed on the brakes. Too late. Metal screamed. Glass exploded. Everything became white. Claire reached for his hand. "I love you," she whispered. Then, nothing. Ethan survived. Claire did not. Neither did 32 strangers aboard the train. The guilt shattered Ethan's mind. He couldn't accept what he had done. So his subconscious built a prison. A train that never reached its destination. A place where he could endlessly search for another explanation. Another killer. Another truth. Anything except himself. Every passenger represented a piece of the lives lost that night. Every mystery. Every impossible event. Every accusation. They were all fragments of Ethan's fractured mind trying to force him to remember. The conductor had never been death. He had always been Ethan's conscience, waiting patiently. For 8 long years. The conductor handed Ethan one final ticket. Unlike the others, this one had no name. Only a single question. "Are you ready to wake up?" Ethan stared at it. His hands trembled. For years he had run from the truth. He had hidden inside endless loops of memory and denial. But there was nowhere left to run. Tears filled his eyes. He whispered the words he had been unable to say for so long. "It was me. I caused the accident. I'm sorry." The ticket began to glow. The train slowly faded. The platform dissolved into white light. The conductor smiled. "Then your journey is over." Ethan opened his eyes. Bright hospital lights shone above him. A heart monitor beeped steadily beside the bed. He blinked. Everything felt unfamiliar. A nurse noticed his movement and rushed from the room. Moments later, doctors surrounded him. One of them smiled with disbelief. "Dr. Cross, you've been unconscious for 8 years." Tears streamed down Ethan's face. He remembered everything. Claire, the crash, the lives that had been lost. For the first time in 8 years, he cried, not because he was trapped, but because he was finally free. Months later, Ethan stood beside a memorial near the abandoned railway crossing. 33 names were engraved in stone. He placed a single white lily beneath Claire's name. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life honoring yours," he whispered. A warm breeze stirred the flowers. For a moment, he thought he heard a distant train whistle. He smiled sadly. Then he walked away. ####epilogue. Late that night, a young woman hurried into the same subway station. Rain poured outside. She had missed the last scheduled train. As the station lights flickered, a low whistle echoed from the darkness. An old train rolled slowly into the platform. Its lanterns glowed softly. Above the first carriage was a familiar word. Midnight. The conductor stepped onto the platform. He checked his pocket watch, then quietly whispered, "All aboard." The train doors opened, and somewhere in the darkness, another journey began. The end.